Hey you guys, welcome back to Chaos and Crime with Tiff, and today we're going to be discussing a cold case from back in 1959 where a 9-year-old girl vanished while she was out selling Campfire Girl mints for the Bluebirds. Now, it took them 62 years to solve this case, but before I begin, I would like to give a massive trigger warning. Viewer discretion is strongly advised because some of the details in this case viewers may find disturbing. 9-year-old Candy Rogers lived with her family in Spokane, Washington. She was a member of the Bluebirds, which was a group that was a part of the Campfire Girls of America, a group that she was really excited to be a part of. She was even more excited to begin going door to door within her community and selling the Campfire Girl mints. On March the 9th of 1959, Candy left her house with 9 boxes of mints to sell. She was only going to be selling these in her direct community on Mission Avenue, so this should have only taken her a couple of hours. When Candy had not returned home by that evening, her parents grew concerned. Her family, her neighbors, and volunteers from within the neighborhood began an urgent search throughout the community. And it was during this search that a box of mints was found along a nearby street, deepening concern and fear, turning a quiet little community into a place of panic, and that's when the authorities were notified. The search for 9-year-old Candace Rogers turned quickly into one of the biggest search efforts in Spokane ever, but sadly in this case it seemed like it just kind of jumped from one tragedy to another. During this search, the U.S. Air Force was involved, the Marine Corps Reserve Unit, the Boy Scouts of America, the U.S. Postal Service, just anybody that they could get involved, they was getting involved. This included helicopters in the air. Sadly, as a helicopter was searching at night, it accidentally ran into a power line, causing the helicopter to crash. There were 5 Air Force men aboard the helicopter at the time of the crash. Sadly, 3 of them did pass away, and the others were injured. Witnesses began reporting to the authorities about a man who was seen out walking around at the time that Candy was out selling her mints. This is what they described him as looking like. Now, the authorities wasn't really sure if this was their guy or not, but they had to circulate the image. They never did really get any tips from this, though. After a 16-day search, some hunters discovered a pair of shoes in a wooded area that led them to a pile of brush with the body of 9-year-old Candace Rogers beneath it. Candace had been bound with her petticoat, strangled, and sexually assaulted. Now, you have to keep in mind, this was 1959. Things were done a lot different then than they are now. DNA technology did not even exist at that point. Evidence at the scene was collected by detectives, though, and thankfully, they stored it. Sadly, though, Candy's case would go cold. Over the years, it was passed from detective to detective and from cold case unit to cold case unit. Then, in the early 2000s, they were able to take all of the evidence from the case, including the clothing that Candy was wearing, and they were able to pull male DNA from it. The DNA was believed to have been semen. Now, at this point, they did have one suspect. His name was Hugh Morris, and once they had that DNA profile, they were able to take it and compare it to his, but he was not a match. This Hugh guy, though, he had already committed 2 murders between the 1950s and 60s, so he was already going to be spending his life in prison anyways, but he was not Candy's killer. By 2021, DNA technology had advanced even more, and they were able to create a genetic profile. At this point, they were able to narrow it down to a family with 3 brothers. One of the brothers had died in 1970. But he did have a wife and daughter, and detectives asked that daughter to provide her DNA so that she could maybe help solve this case, and she agreed. There was a linkage found between the daughter and the DNA that was found on Candy, so that gave them grounds for a warrant to have his body exhumed so that they could collect DNA from his remains. Once that was completed, the DNA from his remains confirmed that John Hoff was Candy's killer. It is believed that he had lived in the area around the time that Candy disappeared, but he was never brought up as a person of interest or a potential suspect. At this point, we still don't know how or if John even knew Candy, or if this was just some random attack. It's also still unknown how he got her in the situation that he got her, but I guess we'll never know because he's dead. John Hoff actually took the cowardly way out. He ended his own life in 1970, so we'll never be able to get any answers from him. And poor little Candy and her family, they will never receive true justice as far as seeing him arrested or incarcerated goes. But I guess in a way, if you think about it, Candy and her family sort of got a different form of justice because John Hoff's life was such a living nightmare. He was so miserable that he chose to take his own life. So, if you have made it this far and you're enjoying my content, thank you. Make sure that you're giving me a follow, and also be sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Love you guys. Catch you next time.